From claims of healings and visions to the world's most inexplicable events, whether you're a believer or a skeptic, the truth is always worth the hunt.
EWTN Radio presents The Miracle Hunter with Michael O'Neill.
Welcome to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. You've probably heard of various types of miracles, whether it's miracles of the body or miracles of bread or miracles of fire, miracles of water. But how about miracles of snow? We'll be talking today about Our Lady of the Snows and the most famous snow miracle in history. We'll also be talking with author Kevin Wells, who's got a brand new book from Scepter. It's called Coached by the Curé, Lessons in Shepherding with St. John Vianney. And of course, St. John Vianney is renowned as one of the great miracle workers in history, and his feast day is just upon us. It's a perfect time to talk about the Curé of Ars. We'll be checking with Kevin Wells in just a little bit. Check out my series, They Might Be Saints, which looks at Americans on the path to sainthood and the search for canonization miracles. And this lines up to my book, They Might Be Saints, available from EWTNRC.com. But each week on EWTN, and also if you go to theymightbesaints.com, you can watch the episodes. They air an episode on EWTN of A New Future Saint. And so coming up on Sunday, August 9th at 1:30 p.m. Central Time, we have They Might Be Saints, Father Michael McGivney. And I examine the canonization cause of Father Michael McGivney, the founder of the Knights of Columbus, who was beatified in 2020. I was there after the miraculous cure of a young boy was attributed to him. That's They Might Be Saints, Father Michael McGivney. Check that one out, Sunday, August 9th at 1:30 p.m. Central Time. My other series, Explore with the Miracle Hunter, is the one where I travel around the world to various shrines and other places of miracles, and we present them on EWTN. One of my favorite episodes is coming right out. It's coming up on August 1st at 5:30 p.m. Central Time, and that is La Salette. I travel to the site of the French Alps where the Virgin of Sorrows appeared in tears to shepherd children, asking them for conversion and penance. And that was truly one of the most remarkable places I've ever filmed at. High up, 7,000 feet up in the Alps, at that place of one of the most famous apparitions in history. Check that one out, Our Lady of La Salette, and Explore with the Miracle Hunter on August 1st at 5:30 p.m. Central Time. People can also go to explorewiththemiraclehunter.com to watch any of the episodes on demand. Later in the show, we're going to be looking at the Might Be Saint of the Day. For today's day, we've got Blessed Giovanni Buffalari, who died in the year 1350 in Italy, of course. And in 365 Days with Mary, we look at Our Lady of Mercy, Our Lady of Ransom, as she's also known, Barcelona in Spain in the year 1218. Each week, we try to present a different title of Mary from all around the world that lines up exactly to the calendar's date. It might be a feast day, it might be the commemoration of a great miracle, the building of a basilica. But someday, somewhere around the world, each and every day, there's a different title of Mary that lines up to that date. And so the question of the week for this week, we're going to be looking at an interesting one. Writing in from Nan, she says, why are some people marooned as blesseds? Does that mean their first miracle was not legit? So people who are on the path to sainthood, they need 2 miracles to advance from blessed to saint. Why are some people stuck on blessed? What does that mean? I'll do my best to answer that one later in the show. And the miracle of the day, we look at the miracle of the Porciuncula Indulgence. That, of course, is August 1st. Let's take a look at the miracle news. We do this every week where we talk about miracles happening all around the world and those things that relate to miracles. And this is an interesting thing that just popped up this past week. And it's fascinating because we've talked about this many, many times on the show already, that in 2024, the Vatican changed its norms or its rules for investigating supernatural events like Marian apparitions. And so we have had the Vatican apply these new norms to different cases around the world, perhaps 10 or 20 of them where they've rendered new judgments or reaffirmed old judgments. but they haven't actually invested any new cases using these norms until this past week. And so there is a new case that's being under investigation, or I should say an old case, but an investigation is beginning under these new norms of the Vatican for investigating Marian apparitions. So this is the first fresh start, you might say, for applying these new rules. And so for more than 2 decades, the small German village of Sievernich has drawn more pilgrims because of reported apparitions received by laywoman Manuela Strack. And beginning on All Saints' Day in the year 2000, she claimed visions of the Blessed Virgin Mary, followed later by reported apparitions of the child Jesus and other saints, or other heavenly figures like the saints. And so thousands have visited the site seeking prayer and conversion, and the Catholic Church has never formally investigated and, of course, therefore has not approved these alleged supernatural events. But rather than issuing an immediate judgment, of course, the Diocese of Aachen has spent years observing the phenomena through ordinary pastoral oversight. Like many of the claims of modern private revelation, Sievernich was allowed to develop while pilgrimages without establishing a formal investigative commission or declaring the apparitions either authentic or false. And so that changed this year when the Diocese of Aachen announced the creation of an official commission to study the alleged apparitions under the Vatican's new 2024 norms for discerning reported supernatural phenomena. And this commission is chaired by a canon lawyer, Professor Stefan Muckel, and he's assisted by additional experts who will examine the reported messages, the visionary, the theological content, and the spiritual fruits associated with the devotion before they make any recommendations to church authorities. And of course, as I mentioned, under the Vatican's new norms, this investigation is not primarily aimed at declaring the apparitions to be supernatural. Instead, the Commission may recommend one of several pastoral judgments, ranging from a favorable nihil obstat, meaning that public devotion may continue without doctrinal concerns, to a declaration that the phenomena is not supernatural, if that's what the evidence shows. But the Church urges the faithful to await the outcome of this investigation with prudence, remembering that even approved private revelations are never part of the deposit of faith and are not binding on Catholics. And of course, in addition to the 6 possible judgments that could come forth according to the new norms, the Church will not be declaring this constate supernaturalitate, established as supernatural. For me, that's one of the sad points of these new norms of the Church, is that it doesn't really give the path forward for declaring anything supernatural without an intervention of the Pope. So we'll see what happens in this particular case, but we'll be reporting on this one as it develops. Let's take a look at Catholic Pub Trivia. We do this every week where we ask a trivia question and give out a prize to an emailer who writes in the fastest with the correct answer. And last week we talked about Eucharistic miracles. And so the question was, how many Eucharistic miracles from North America have been approved by the Catholic Church? And we might imagine that there are many, many Eucharistic miracles happening all around the world. And there have been some, perhaps 100 or less around the world, that have been recognized by the Church in some kind of a way. But in North America, there is only one Eucharistic miracle at Tixla in Mexico. And the Eucharistic miracle of Tixla is an event where a consecrated host reportedly began oozing a reddish substance identified in local church studies as human blood and heart muscle tissue. The event occurred on October 21st, 2006 at the St. Martin of Tours parish during a parish retreat mass. People can learn all about this Tixla Eucharistic miracle if they go to the on-demand site for EWTN. If you go to Explore with the Miracle Hunter, you can get right to that page and watch that episode on Tixla, perhaps the most stunning of all modern Eucharistic miracles. Now, the question for this week, we're talking about St. John Vianney with Kevin Wells today, and his feast day is coming right up. So this is a question about St. John Vianney. What Marian visionary also claimed visions of St. John Vianney before seeing Mary? So that question again, what Marian visionary also claimed visions of St. John Vianney before seeing the Virgin Mary? If you think you know that question and want to win the prize, the image of the faces of Mary, send me an email to questions@miraclehunter.com, and maybe you'll be the fastest with the right answers. And answers and winners will be posted on the show page on miraclehunter.com. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to be talking with Kevin Wells, author of the new book, Coached by the Curé, Lessons in Shepherding with St. John Vianney. Stay with us for that.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter, and I'm kind of excited about a series that's out from Scepter Books. It's a connection between saints and coaching. It's this kind of Coached By series, and we have a new book that's out. We've interviewed other authors in the past who have written about saints who could be great coaches for us, but we have Coached by the Curé, Lessons in Shepherding with St. John Vianney. And this is a release from Scepter Books. And we're so excited to be joined today by the author, Kevin Wells, who's joined us for previous discussions about Father Aloysius Schwartz and other occasions throughout his book writing career. So thank you so much, Kevin, for joining us again on today's program.
Michael, I love being on with you because you hold up the paragons and the titans, and what more do we need is to look up and see the great ones. So thanks for having me on to speak about the Curé of ours.
Absolutely. And I think that you've written a number of books leading up to this one where we point to the priest that we need, we might say, or we're talking about Father Al Schwartz, the great priest who we both paid attention to his life in an episode of They Might Be Saints Together. We interviewed you for that one. And here we have one of the ultimate priests, we might say, or the one of the all-time greats. And we're talking about the Curé of Ars, St. John Vianney. What got you onto this topic?
Well, because I love the ministerial priesthood. I grew up in the shadow of my uncle, Monsignor Thomas Wells, who really was a giant in the Archdiocese of Washington for many years. So as a little kid, I saw what good priests are able to do to move souls, convert them, save marriages, get in my head when I was doing knucklehead things and redirect me. And so all these years later, I often get asked, like, hey, Wells, why are you always writing books about priests? And I think I saw firsthand years ago what the power of a good priest is able to do. And I think all these years later, it led to Coached by the Curé, Lessons of Shepherding with St. John Vianney. And I guess the last thing I'll say about this book is I guess I'm just arrogant enough. I wrote it from his tongue. It's from his voice. It's how John Vianney would speak to moms and dads in 2026 to maybe encourage us. This is the way to really build domestic churches in your home, and you are the domestic priest in the home, and you have a share of that priesthood. So he really directs moms and dads as the patron saint of all parish priests about how to be priests in the home.
Well, that's incredible. And there's got to be some challenges, of course, writing in the voice of St. John Vianney, a priest who lived long ago, and now in our modern day and age, we speak very differently. We have a different focus. How were you able to sort of take on that role, and what were the challenges that you ran into there?
Well, Mike, you and I love challenges. So we start with, I have to get to know the man. So I read 3 books written on him, including what's considered arguably the best, and that's by True Show on his life. But I read 2 or 3 other books on his life, so I began to understand the magnitude of what he did in post-revolution France. And I guess as an Irishman and an old sports writer, I took a lot of those stories when he became a priest in 1818 after the Reign of Terror, and what he did to win back a spiritually gutted village, ours, that really very few of the townsfolk were attending Mass, and what he had to do to earn their trust after the Revolution and to bring them back. And this is the problem that moms and dads are facing today is too many kids are checked out from the faith, or they left the faith, or they're having trouble raising their children. So John Vianney says, well, moms and dads, I get it. Don't look at me as like a Little House on the Prairie priest, because the characteristics of shepherding, they're immutable. Like maybe I dealt with just cabarets and loud taverns, and you're dealing with cell phones and AI and scrolling, but your role and my role are identical. So he takes the stories from the past and sort of brings them to modern day issues, and he sort of guides moms and dads to what he did back then, and they can do the same things today.
Absolutely. We're talking today with Kevin Wells, author of Coached by the Curé, Lessons in Shepherding with St. John Vianney, and that's out from Scepter Books. And tell us, give us sort of an insight into how he coaches. What is the way that message is delivered? What is the style or the format that allows these coaching tips to make it through to a modern parent?
Well, in reading all those, I would say, 1,000 or 2,000 pages of John Vianney's life, 9 or 10 characteristics came to the fore, and I based, I guess, the 10 chapters in the book off of John Vianney's own life. So, for instance, the first chapter is for mom and dad that they must maintain humility, because you can't really help guide your kids to becoming deeper in relationship with Jesus Christ or the faith if you're just angry because he's checked out. So like chapter 1 is how, for instance, to give your listener an idea, I think many people know the famous story when early on in John Vianney's priesthood, there was a petition that was sent all around town and was signed by priests, probably 200 or so townsfolk, that petitioned John Vianney to be removed not only from ours, but from the priesthood. They said he was neurotic. They said he was strange, wild-eyed, because from the ambo he was preaching prophetically. He was trying to protect their souls as a father, and so this petition to have him removed that was going to be sent to the bishop. One of his few friends, showed him the petition, and John Vianney read the removal of his priesthood signed by all these different folks that he knew in town. And, sort of with teary eyes, he signed his own name and said, you're right, I'm not worthy. So he kind of lays out the demand of what humility is for a mom and dad. So this is sort of an example of, just one example of, I guess, the many 3 or 4 dozens that I give throughout the book.
Absolutely, and when we reflect on the life of John Vianney, it's an incredible one, and it includes some mystical experiences, some miracles as well. Tell us a little bit about how, in any way, sort of his understanding of the spiritual world can play a role in what we learn from his example.
I would say that there's many examples of miracles in ours, but I would say the one that I like to point to is he gave all credit to Philomena, the mysterious 3rd century martyr from Rome that was found in a catacomb, a hidden part of the catacomb in the early 1800s. And when he discovered the power of Philomena and how she began to sort of appear throughout the French countryside to different folks with the same story of how she was martyred, he said, God, if I'm going to be a martyr, like a white martyr, for ours, then I want to offer everything on behalf of Philomena. Philomena is my intercessor. I want to suffer, and if need be, become a red martyr, white martyr. So all the miracles that came, he gave to 2 people. He gave, Philomena gets all the credit, or Our Lady, Mary, gets all the credit. And I'll say that, Michael, he in a way, really tried to make of his priesthood a certain servitude or a slavery to Mary. And because he knew that ours was spiritually bankrupt, he said, Mary, I can't stop, so I ask you to show me how to nail my priesthood to the cross, like to crucify my priesthood, to help me to work longer hours for these souls that he felt were going to be damned. And then 18 to 20 hour days every day for his entire priesthood. he worked to get those souls back. And as I think many of your listeners would know, he was known for spending as many as 10 to 12 hours every single day in the confessional. And
yeah, let's talk about yeah, his dedication is off the charts with the time in the confessional and his other activities. Talk about the life of devotion to helping the faithful that St. John Vianney had, and how we can kind of learn from that. What can we learn from this great coach and his effort that he put in?
Well, what I'm going to say is, so every night, after an 18, 20-hour day, every night he would collapse into bed. But before he actually just shut his eyes and just zonked out, every single night he read from the lives of the saints, because he understood because he loved the saints, number one, and he wanted to be like the saints. That's probably why he is a saint. But he knew that he needed to learn from hard workers, from martyrs, from holy souls. So he just immersed himself in the lives of the saints, and that really helped him stay on path during the hard days when the devil attacked. He was one of the most attacked, I would say, saints down the annals, down the millennia, like Padre Pio, John Vianney, constantly attacked by Satan. So he needed to keep going back to the saints and to Mary and to Philomena so he could serve in this dark time of the post-revolution France.
And you did draw the connection between post-revolution France and our modern day. What are these parallels again regarding the lack of faith that we see, even amongst people who purport to be Christians, at least in background?
John Vianney saw that many hundreds of, I would call, fake priests or false priests, or what really is called technically juror priests, they signed the oath to Robespierre during the revolution so they wouldn't be guillotined, so they wouldn't lose their heads. So really they started to preach a false priesthood, a false Catholicism. This is sort of the atmosphere that John Vianney stepped into. So he knew not only were Catholics no longer praying, they weren't attending Mass, they weren't attending the sacraments. So all these years later, in 2026, I'll be candid now, Michael. I think until our church really returns wholeheartedly, full scale, to the demand of what it is to be a follower of Christ, the cost to engage in a deeper, let's say, interior prayer life, or maybe more frequent confessions, or maybe trying to get to adoration more often, or getting a few extra weekday masses in. And until this is really emphasized, then we're always maybe be sort of kind of floating around. And John Vianney wouldn't permit this. And after 20 years in ours, every single towns member came back to the Catholic faith because John Vianney told them what the truth was. And he also told them very candidly the state of their soul did not look good unless they returned to God. And they finally bought in, and they all came back to the faith.
Beautiful. And we've got the feast day of St. John Vianney right upon us here, August 4th, coming right up. And for those people who want to learn more about St. John Vianney, tell us what is the best place that people can go to get this book and also to find more about you?
Well, I'll make it easy for your listener. I would just go to kevinwells.org. That's kevinwells.org, and they can just order it right off the site, or just go to Amazon. But one-stop shopping there at kevinwells.org, and that's they can learn a lot about John Vianney on my site.
Wonderful. Well, we're so grateful to you for writing yet another book about great priests, and we look forward to this one and the next one. We thank you so much for joining us on today's program.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate it. I always enjoy being on with you.
God bless. That was Kevin Wells, author of the new book, Coached by the Curé, Lessons in Shepherding with St. John Vianney. August 4th is the feast day of St. John Vianney, so this is a perfect time to reconnect with this perhaps most famous of all priests, St. John Vianney. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to be looking at the question of the week. Stay with us for that.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. Hey, I love getting your questions. People write in from around the world with questions about miracles happening in today's world and those that have happened centuries ago. And of course, I love getting the email questions. I got a pretty strange and interesting email inbox. It's hard to keep up with all the questions that come in, but I also love answering questions in person. And I do that when I give a talk at different places around the country, whether it's a Catholic parish or a shrine or another event, a conference. I love talking about miracles, Eucharistic miracles and Marian apparitions, how the Church investigates the supernatural, miracles of the saints, and other things. And so I usually go around the country 10 or 20 times a year, speak for about 45 minutes, and I love answering questions afterwards. It's my favorite part, to hear what people are thinking about in the world of miracles. And for people who want to contact me to invite me to their parish, you can go to my website, miraclehunter.com, and click on the Contact tab, and you can send me a message that way. And maybe I'll be speaking at a parish near you sometime soon. And coming up soon on August 1st, I'll be traveling to Connecticut. I'll be speaking to the National Conference of the Knights of Lithuania. Recently, I produced a new program on EWTN called Miracles of Shilova, about the apparitions of Our Lady of Shilova, and I'll be presenting that at the conference, and hopefully I'll get some good questions there as well. So look out for that on EWTN On Demand coming soon. Miracles of Shilova. Now back to the question of the week. The one I got this week, it was quite a good one, and I have to admit nobody's quite asked me it this way, but I thought it was fascinating. The question is, Dear Miracle Hunter, why are some people on the path to sainthood marooned as blesseds? Does that mean that their first miracle was not legit? Thank you, Nan. Well, thanks, Nan, for your question. And it's pretty interesting because I think that when we see there are perhaps 10,000 saints in the history of the Church down through all those years, all those places. But we do see people who are just sort of stuck as a blessed. And I remember as a child knowing of St. Caterina Tekakwitha, and she was a blessed for a very long time and wasn't a saint. And I always thought, what's wrong there? Why is she stuck? Why isn't that cause moving along? And it was only until later, perhaps, becoming the Miracle Hunter, that spending time writing the book They Might Be Saints and the program They Might Be Saints, that I had a greater understanding of how miracles work in sainthood processes. And, we always think of, well, if these people are up in heaven and they can work all the miracles they want, why aren't they working many, many miracles? And why aren't they approving them? And why aren't all these people saints? Why are people stuck at blessed? And I think when I was reflecting on this, the idea that of finding miracles is actually quite difficult, partly because of the seriousness of the criteria. It must be a serious condition, not liable to go on its own. It must be an instantaneous, complete, and lasting cure, and there can be no other crisis which changes the events, and there can be no medical treatment that relates to the cure. And I think in this modern day and age, of course, everybody gets treatment for their diseases and their illnesses. And it's only the cases where the medicine fails, or in the case of where the medicine has not been applied yet, that they will even consider that in Rome. And I suppose that even when on the local level a miracle is reported to a cause, and that cause does its own investigation on their own dime to investigate and research into whether a miracle happened, always medical miracles with the before and after documentation readily available, then it's submitted to Rome, and then it goes through another process, the medical commission in Rome at the Dicastery for the Causes of Saints. But I think the most interesting part of this whole puzzle is that, when it comes to miracles that are considered for canonization causes, the prayers must be directed to just one singular might be saint. And I always like to make this joke, but when I'm in trouble and I need a miracle, I'm praying to all my friends, the saints in heaven, Padre Pio and Saint Therese and everyone else who I think is a pretty good miracle worker who can help me. But when it comes to canonization miracles, you've got to be praying to just one person, and a person who isn't even a saint yet. So we might have kind of doubts about, do they have the miracle-working powers of a Padre Pio or a Saint John Vianney or a Saint Therese? So I think that the reason why a person prays to just that one saint, and that particular might be saint, is always pretty rare. I think there's a interesting backstory. Anytime somebody picks somebody who's not officially a saint and prays to them, I think everybody's got a special point of connection or a reason for doing that. So it's inherently very rare that people are seeking out miracles from these might-be saints. So it's a great question, Nan. Thank you for your question about that. But there are some people who have been marooned at blessed, you might say. That doesn't imply they're not in heaven. It just maybe implies that people aren't praying to them, or it's so complicated to actually find a miracle that passes all the criteria and the prayers are directed to just that one person. It takes a certain aligning of the stars, you might say. But it's a great question, Nan. And if you have a question for the Miracle Hunter, you can send me a question to questions@miraclehunter.com, and maybe I'll be answering your question on the air next week. Let's take a look at the 365 Days with Mary project. We do this every week where we look at the Marian devotion of the day as it lines up exactly to the day's date. We all know Lourdes, February 13th, or Guadalupe, December 12th, or Fatima, May 13th. But believe it or not, there's a different other Marian devotion that lines up to each and every day of the calendar year. And so it might be the feast day, it might be a great miracle worked on that date, it might be the building of a basilica, or another celebration that honors Mary in a special way in somewhere around the world on that date. And so for today's day, we've got Our Lady of Mercy from Barcelona in Spain in the year 1218. And the story goes that in an apparition of August 1st to St. Peter, to his confessor Raymond of Pennafort, and to King James of Aragon, the Blessed Virgin was dressed in white, in a white long tunic, a scapular and a cloak on her shoulders, and a fine lace mantilla veiling her shoulders, veiling her hair. And some images have her even carrying 2 bags of coins for use in ransoming Christians imprisoned by the Muslims, or her arms extended with open chains, a symbol of liberation. And another name for this title is Our Lady of Ransom instead of Our Lady of Mercy. And through these men, she established the Mercedarian religious order, which comes from the Spanish word for mercy, merced, and its members would seek to free Christian captives and offer themselves for an exchange. And a feast day was instituted and observed on September 24th, and it was extended to the entire church by Innocent XII. In 1696, and that's today's 365 Days with Mary devotion, Our Lady of Mercy from Barcelona in Spain in the year 1218. For more information on this fascinating devotion, or any of the hundreds of other Marian devotions from around the world, you can go to the website, 365dayswithmary.com. You can pick up the book, download the free app from the iOS App Store, or go to the Facebook page for 365 Days with Mary. And on your Facebook feed, you can get a new title of Mary each and every day. Let's take a look at the miracle of the day. We do this every week as well. We try to find a miracle that happened or is related to the day's date. And today is August 1st, and we've got the miracle of the Porciuncula indulgence. And the story goes that on a summer night around the year 1216, while praying in the tiny chapel of Our Lady of the Angels, known as the Porciuncula, near Assisi, St. Francis experienced a vision of Christ and the Blessed Virgin Mary surrounded by angels. And Christ asked Francis what grace he desired for the salvation of souls, and he boldly requested that anyone who visited this little church with sincere repentance and sacramental confession would receive a full pardon from their sins. And Christ granted the request, and Pope Honorius III later confirmed the extraordinary privilege. It was originally limited to the Porciuncula Chapel. The indulgence was eventually extended to all parish churches and Franciscan churches on August 1st, allowing countless faithful to receive this spiritual grace. And the event is remembered as a miraculous sign of God's mercy flowing through one of Christianity's humblest chapels. And that is the miracle of the day today on August 1st, the miracle of the Porciuncula indulgence. Let's take a look at the sainthood news. We do this every week where we try to look at a person on the path to sainthood, or a news about a person on the path to sainthood. And we always try to keep you up to date about who's coming through the pipeline. And on Thursday, June 18th, the Holy Father Pope Leo received in audience His Eminence Cardinal Marcello Semeraro, the prefect for the dicastery for the causes of saints. And during this audience, the Pope authorized the same dicastery to promulgate the decree regarding the heroic virtues of the servant of God, Maria Petra Giordano. She was born Nicoletta, and she was a professed nun of the Order of Preachers, born on July 4th, 1912 in Naples, and died on June 21st in Bibbiena, also in Italy. And as according to the Dicastery of the Causes of Saints website, she was a professed nun, and she lived out the Christian virtues and practiced the evangelical counsels with commitment and constant fidelity, and she is considered a timely model for virtuous living, and her spiritual journey can be applied to everyone's life. Faith and vocation were the cornerstones of her life. And that is servant of God Maria Petra Giordano, who has become a venerable. With one miracle, she will be known as Blessed Maria Petra Giordano, and she is the sainthood news for today. And we always try to keep you lined up to the day's date, and August 1st is today. We've got Blessed Giovanni Buffalari, who died in the year 1350. And he was a brother of Blessed Lucy Buffalari. That's quite a family to have two blesseds. He was an Augustinian friar, hermit at Rieti in Italy, and he loved to serve at Mass. He was a friary porter, and he cared for travelers and for the poor. And he was born near Rome in Castelporziano, and he died in 1350 of natural causes. And there were many miraculous healings that were reported at his tomb, and he was declared venerable in 1832 by Pope Gregory XVI in a confirmation of his cult. And that is Blessed Giovanni Buffalari. With one miracle, he will go on to be Saint Giovanni Buffalari, and he's today's Might Be Saint of the Day. And for those people who are interested in this focus on the Might Be Saints, you can pick up my book, They Might Be Saints, which is available from EWTNRC.com, the EWTN Religious Catalog. They Might Be Saints. I think it's my best one. But you can also watch the television series on EWTN Television weekly, or you can go to theymightbesaints.com and watch any of the episodes online. So on Sunday, August 9th at 1:30 p.m. Central Time, They Might Be Saints presents the life of Father Michael McGivney. And I examine the canonization cause of Father Michael McGivney, the founder of the Knights of Columbus, who was beatified in 2020. I was there myself that day after the miraculous cure of a young boy attributed to Blessed Michael McGivney. And he's the subject of the upcoming episode of They Might Be Saints. Check that one out. They Might Be Saints, Father Michael McGivney, Sunday, August 9th at 1:30 p.m. Central Time. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we'll be talking with our next guest. Stay with us for that.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. One of the things that we talk about when we talk about miracles is the impact they've had on the world. And we talk about things like sacramentals, perhaps the rosary given to St. Dominic in the year 1206, or St. Simon Stock receiving the brown scapular, or St. Juan Diego receiving the tilma of Our Lady of Guadalupe, or the miraculous medal received by St. Catherine Labouré. And we also talk about the influence that they've had as far as the building of churches around the world. Believe it or not, there have been many miracles that have resulted in churches, and some very big ones at that. And I think 5 of the largest 12 churches in the world have sort of a miraculous backstory where, as a result of a Marian apparition or other miracle, it went on to house a church in that location. And one of the most famous cases in all of Christian history, and maybe one of the very early ones, relates to Our Lady of the Snows. There was a miracle there, perhaps a Marian apparition, or we might want to say just a miracle of snow that led to the building of St. Mary Major, one of the 4 papal basilicas or major basilicas found in Rome. And so we're so excited today because we're coming up on next week's program. We'll be having a new episode of Explore with the Miracle Hunter, where I'll be visiting Rome and telling the story of St. Mary Major, as well as the apparitions received by Alphonse Ratisbonne, also in Rome. And so we're excited today to talk with someone from the rector of the Shrine of Our Lady of the Snows in the United States, and that is Father David Uribe. And the shrine is in Belleville, Illinois. Welcome to the program today, Father David.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, this is kind of an exciting devotion. I think that many Americans don't know that, despite us having a very large shrine, your shrine here in Belleville, Illinois. And I've been to your shrine myself, being an Illinois guy myself. So we're excited today to talk about this. But I think that people should know more about this Our Lady of the Snows devotion. And it's celebrated every August 5th in Rome with a drop of white rose petals at St. Mary Major. So it's celebrated even to this day, even though it dates back to the 4th century. So let's just dial it back a little bit. What happened, according to pious tradition, with Our Lady of the Snows?
Yes, well, every time our Heavenly Mother intervenes with with us in some fashion, it is always around some type of event or happenings that are going about. And back in the 4th century, of course, what was real prominent at the time, at least what they were getting over, was the persecution of Christians. From the time of Jesus, the time of the apostles, the Romans and the Jewish authorities were going after anybody who was following the footsteps of Jesus of Nazareth, and trying to disprove that he was the Son of God and the Messiah. And so it was an immediate threat to the Jewish authorities, of course, and more importantly, to Rome. And Rome wanted to crush anything that was so powerful. And so, of course, it led to the destruction of the temple in the year 70. At least for the Romans to get that control of the Jews, and then as well. So the persecution had happened ever since then. And a lot of it was that, Christians were being thrown into the underground church, into the crypts, into the different places where they could gather in secret and they can gather in prayer and, to celebrate, the Eucharist in memory of Jesus as he asked, and, of course, all the blessings and all the prayers and all the just the communities that could form together. And so if you imagine that was the reality for the Christians for the first, 2.5 centuries, then that, was in its sense, was a lot of prayer going up to God to be liberated from this persecution to being sought out by the Romans. So when we get up to the year about the year 323 to 24 to 325, when finally a Roman emperor finally was more of a businessman, and he said, we've spent too much time and energy and effort and certainly finances to get rid of these followers of Jesus, these Christians as they were already known. And so, they finally, as a businessman, he said, let's just do away with this. Let's just tax them and allow them to, practice their faith and just religious freedom on their part. And so when he put out an edict in the empire that said that Christians are now allowed to, they'll be able to pay a tax just to do what they wanted to do, and they can practice freely. Well, for the Christian community, that was an answer to many, many prayers for many, many decades and of course, centuries, for them to be liberated from that. So in the expression for them to, really express this new faith that they're able to give glory to God and to build the church that they really wanted to, they wanted to go to the heart of the empire, and that's Rome. And so in Rome, that is where they wanted to build the great churches, especially in the great testaments of the apostles. So they knew that they could build a church for St. Peter, right where he was buried on Vatican Hill. So that's where we have the present church for the Basilica of St. Peter. Then they wanted to go find St. Paul, where he was buried and just outside the wall. And so there we have the great Basilica Church of St. Paul. Then the Lateran family had a place, at time and resources that they had property as well, where they wanted to build a church as well. And so that's St. John Lateran, to be dedicated as a cathedral, as what we know as a cathedral today for the Diocese of Rome. Well, they came together and they said, we want to build a great church in honor of Mary. And so at that time, 325, 326, they said, well, Mary, the other places had physical locations within the city to build these great churches in the glory of God for all that God has done, and now that they're able to express their faith, even more so that they're able to go forth and do that. So they wanted to build this church in honor of Mary. And so what they did was, at the time, the successor of Peter just said, let's put it into prayer, and so they put it into prayer. And it wasn't until about 30 years later, we believe in the year 358, that this childless couple, who were great Marian devotees, great faith in Christ and in the church. They had been praying for a long time to find this place for this church. Well, the gentleman falls asleep, and this is August the 4th of the year 358. And so he falls asleep, and in his sleep he has a dream where Mary sends a message and says, where there is snow, build my church there. So I'm sure that he got up in the morning. As everybody knows, August is the hottest month in Rome, and it is the warmest. Even the Romans, they leave the city and they go up into the mountains and they go to other places where they can experience a cooler month. So he probably got up in the morning and just said, we'll look for snowfall. The next snowfall, wherever that falls, that's where we'll look. Well, he began to hear chatter on the roadside, outside the houses in the roads, that there was a snowfall on a small hill, the Esquiline Hill, there in Rome. And so he and his wife went out and they looked and they wanted to witness it because he knew that in his dream that Mary had given that message: where there is snow, build my church. Well, as soon as they got to the spot, and sure enough, there was snow on the ground, that's where he began to tell people that he had received this message from Mary. At the same time, the successor of Peter, which is Liberius, he also showed up at the place because he had also heard about this miracle snowfall, and he began to express the same thing as well. Mary said to me in a dream that where there is snowfall, that this is the place to build the church. And as they all came together, and as legend shows, it's Liberius who is there, who's outlining, the outer walls of the church and what we know today as St. Mary Major. And so we give credit to, the snowfall because of what Mary had indicated to these two faithful folks, and more importantly to the people of God. But more importantly, that when the churches are built, that's just verification that God wants the graces that come with everything that a temple church brings about, that is always going to be a site where God gives his blessings and graces to his people. And so this is what we believe, and this is what we continue to honor in the fact that Mary, in speaking for God, is that we can certainly build these churches in which we can bring about the graces that God wants. And so we, in a month that's very, very contrary to what, the snowfall can bring, that this is what that means. And this is why we celebrate the miracle snowfall, even to today, within the St. Mary Major Church, where we have the falling of the white rose petals from the top.
Absolutely. We've been talking today with Father David Uribe, giving this amazing story, this backstory of the building of St. Mary Major. And as he just mentioned, that every August 5th, that's celebrated in Rome, where they drop these white rose petals from the ceiling. And in the new episode of Explore with the Miracle Hunter, which airs next Saturday, November 19th at 5 p.m. Central Time, we actually have footage from Rome where we show these white rose petals descending in celebration of this traditional miracle that's been celebrated over the centuries, and it's known as Our Lady of the Snows, and that comprises half of the episode that will be airing. And we have some beautiful recreations where we actually show Pope Liberius having this dream, and John and his wife having this dream, and then meeting at the top of this at this hill in Rome and seeing the outline in snow. So I encourage people to check that one out next Saturday, November 19th at 5 p.m. Central Time, Explore with the Miracle Hunter. And this is not just a devotion that stays in Rome, stays in Italy. Here in the United States, we have a national shrine of Our Lady of the Snows in Belleville, Illinois. I've been there myself. I'm an Illinois guy myself, and so I've traveled there and been to that shrine, which is a very well-developed shrine. There's just about everything that a pilgrim would want when they're visiting a shrine. Talk to us a little bit, Father David. How did this shrine come to be in Belleville, Illinois?
Sure. Yeah, we are located in Belleville, Illinois, just right outside of St. Louis, Missouri. We're just about 15 minutes east of downtown St. Louis, just crossing the Mississippi River, which makes it, Illinois. And so how it started was we had a missionary priest, and, we are part of the Missionary Oblates of Mary Immaculate, a religious order of priests and brothers that founded the shrine here in Belleville. And it came from this one missionary oblate who was from Germany, and he was in the seminary when the first war broke out in Europe. And so, at that time when seminaries are about and the war begins and war is declared, the seminaries are emptied and everybody is enrolled into the military. And so that we got this Paul Schulte, who was in that reality. So in the First World War, one of the major advances, one of the major technology that was there was planes and how to use planes, in the effort to win a war. So he trained as a pilot for the German army and, did his time during the war. When the war was over, he returned to the seminary. This time he returned to join the missionary oblates. And so when he went to the seminary, he had these hopes and dreams to go to the missions in Africa. When he was close to ordination, he got his obedience, and instead of Africa, he ended up in the Arctic, Canadian Arctic. And that was his first order. So after getting ordained, he got on a boat from Europe and headed over to Montreal, landed there, was oriented about what he was going to do, and then got on his docks. He says, "You're going to be a missionary to the missions that we have in the Arctic." And so he was like, "Okay, where's my vehicle?" And they said, no vehicle. You get a dog sleigh, and you get a brother who is going to accompany you. And so he did. He got on a dog sleigh and then began to travel north from Montreal to the first mission. It took him about a month to get there, and then stayed there for about a month to do what he needed to do, and then he was on to the next mission, which took him another 3 to 4 weeks to get to. And in his mind, he's saying, "This is crazy. I'm a pilot. There are a number of surplus planes that are out on the fields in Europe. I'm going to ask the oblates if they can purchase one and have them bring it over." So that happened. So he was able to get a plane over, and he was able to fly from his the different missions. And instead of taking 3 to 4 weeks to travel, it now just took 1 to 2 days to travel through. And so he spent his time up in the Canadian. So we have a map about all the missions that he founded and that he had all along the Arctic coast, and there were a number of them. Well, he had a great devotion to Our Lady of the Snows, and how appropriate now in this reality where there's a lot of snow that he would always pray to her, and he named his mission there after Our Lady of the Snows. So what happened was that he was doing just fine, and so this is in the 30s and whatnot. Well, war broke out again in 1938 in Europe, this time with the Nazi regime. And by 1941, there was a lot of suspicion with the Canadian authorities, and of course with the Germans, with the Nazi regime, that they would come into North America. And so it just so happened that Father Schulte was at a mission one day. He was right off the coast, and on his radio, he started to get some messages in German. And he himself, as a German, wanted to hear it. So he responded to one, these messages, and it turned out to be a Nazi submarine just off the coast. Well, at the same time, the Canadian authorities also picked it up, and so they realized that there was a connection there. So the big threat was that the Nazis would come into North America either from the north or from the south, right? From Mexico or from Canada. And so when the Canadian authorities approached him, they found out that this missionary oblate had these mapped out all this Arctic notion with missions, and and as a former soldier for the German, he became a threat to the Canadian authorities. And so they approached him. They did this research. They realized that they needed to expel him from that because he could easily be influenced. He kept insisting, I'm a Catholic priest. I'm here to do the Lord's work. I'm here to do all these things. And so they only gave him 2 days to escape, to leave Canada. So they expelled him from Canada. He didn't know where to go. So what happened was that he just looked on the map for the oblates and realized that Belleville, Illinois was the next concentration of oblates that he could join. And so he got on a train, or I believe, and ended up in Belleville. So this is of April of 1941, and that's where he came. When he came here to Belleville, the American authorities found out who he was, and as well they were alerted by the Canadian authorities. And so when he came here, he was put under house arrest at a seminary that we had here in Belleville at the time, St. Henry Seminary. So the rector at the time decided that what he could do since he's under house arrest is just to respond to the letters for the donors and whatnot. And so there's only so many ways you can say thank you to the donors. And so he asked the superior if he could write about his stories about the missions that he had and the great devotion that he had to Our Lady of the Snows. And so the rector gave him permission. And each time he wrote a letter and put a story and put more information about Our Lady and the devotion that he had and the different mission stories, more mail would come in. He'd write another story, more mail would come in. And all of a sudden you had this donor base, for the seminary who wanted to hear more stories about Our Lady of the Snows and whatnot. At the same time, in the community, there was another priest, Father Edwin Guild, and he saw that this could turn into a great devotion and also a shrine. And so that's the beginnings of the shrine, was that it began through a mail campaign, just letters, but people just hungry for the word, and more importantly, hungry for the devotion to Our Lady of the Snows. Who is this Our Lady of the Snows? And so it all happened with just this German priest, missionary, oblate, just, being at the wrong place at the wrong time, coming from the wrong place because of the situation that's coming out. But then what happened was he did come here with Father Edwin. The both of them decided that they would build a shrine at the seminary, and then they immediately started a novena, and the novena became very, very popular, and where thousands of people were drawn in, especially in the month of August, to come in to really celebrate this devotion that they had with Our Lady of the Snows. And the current location of the shrine right now was built, started in 1958, and it started with the grotto here, and then immediately was built for an outdoor amphitheater church, and that's what we have that was built in the 1960s. And that's with the big crowds that we had back in the days. People would come on devotion, and they would come on pilgrimage to really be part of the celebration of Our Lady of the Snows, and more importantly, that Our Lady who's always protected, especially in difficult circumstances, that Our Lady would always bring in this hope and especially the healing that people would always respond to. And so here we have this national shrine. It is the largest outdoor shrine in North America, and so we do have lots. It's about 90 acres of lots of different places, devotions. We certainly have a mass schedule. There's confessions every day. We're well known here to have people to come in from lots of different places to come and receive the sacrament of reconciliation, but then as well as to be part of the programming that we have as well throughout the year.
Wonderful. Well, we're so grateful to you, Father David Uribe, for giving us the fascinating backstory of the Shrine of Our Lady of the Snows in Belleville, Illinois. And people can learn more about that and visit the shrine. And you have a great website, or a great URL. It's snows.org, which is a great way to get connected to your site. And how can people find out more? What's the best way for people to visit your shrine?
Yeah, certainly by visiting our website. We've got lots of information there, snows.org, snows.org, or you can call our main number directly, and that's 618-397-6700. And so you can call and just continue to just ask the questions. We have lots of different services, and then, especially during this time of the year, we begin with our Way of Lights, which is a journey to Bethlehem. And so we turn this large acreage into lots of different, we put up so many lights, over 1.5 million lights, to really represent that journey to Jerusalem. Our grotto turns into the nativity scene, and we have lots of different activities and whatnot, and that's been a tradition for over 50 years called the Shrine Way of Life. And so it's a family tradition. We welcome everybody, especially at this time of the year.
Well, this is a great time of year to go visit the Shrine of Our Lady of the Snows in Belleville, Illinois, outside St. Louis. People can find out more at snows.org. Thank you so much, Father David Uribe, for joining us on today's program.
Thank you for having me.
God bless. That was Father David Uribe from the National Shrine of Our Lady of the Snows in Belleville, Illinois. Sounds like they have some beautiful things planned, as is the tradition around this Christmas season. And that's all the time we have for today's program. If you missed any of this episode or want to catch up on past episodes, you can go to ewtn.com/radio, check out the audio archives, or download the free EWTN app. I'd like to thank our guest today, Kevin Wells, author of the book by Scepter, Coached by the Curé, Lessons in Shepherding with St. John Vianney. Also, Father David Uribe joined us to talk about Our Lady of the Snows. Check out my Explorer series on EWTN, where I travel to all the Marian shrines all around the world, including the site of Our Lady of La Salette, when I traveled to the French Alps where the Virgin of Sorrows appeared in tears to shepherd children, asking them for conversion and penance. That airs on August 1st at 5:30 p.m. Central Time, or available at explorewiththemiraclehunter.com. And I'd like to thank you for joining me today on Miracle Hunter, where from claims of healings and visions to the world's most inexplicable events, whether you're a believer or a skeptic, the truth is always worth a hunt. Talk to you next week.